Thank you all for joining us for another episode of Follow Your Heart as we journey through the experience of creating greater joy, peace, and a life we love to live. Today we have with us Jennifer Hough. She is a best-selling author, seer, and lover of life. She made a traumatic transition in her 30s from working for a multinational corporation doing forecasts to seeing people, life, and the world as an energy holograph. She now travels the world acting as a conduit for those who seek the ability to fully live out their purpose with clarity and confidence. Why? Because it became clear that we are ready as human beings to be free, expand our compassion, and fully enjoy our lives instead of living out of fear and control. She engages metaphysical tools that bypass the need to constantly analyze by going direct with consciousness. Jennifer's work is for those that know it's time to be the change, be fulfilled, and find that something more that is waiting for us. Learn more about Jennifer and her work at thewideawakening.com. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being with us today. I know what a contribution you are in our world, and it's so generous of you to share your time with our listeners.
It's my pleasure. And beyond that, it's also my reason for being on the planet. So it's completely my honor and privilege to be able to be here. And thank you for inviting me.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I know that we had chatted a little bit about the Follow Your Heart series. And when you consider what is the heart that we are trying to live by, what comes to mind for you?
I think that most people, when they hear live by heart, they hear one of two things. One is live by their instinct, and the other is live by love, because we always associate the heart with love. And for me, it's actually much more scientific. It's much more hardcore. It's hardwired. You know, I remember watching for the first time by Neil deGrasse Tyson this beautiful video he did. I'm sure it's been watched like millions, if not billions, of times at this point. But it's all about the fact that we, not in some airy fairy world, but in a very real way, we really did come from the original stardust that was birthed from, the original atom that ever existed. And so all of the knowledge, it's like looking at a tree with all the rings as it gets older and older and older and older. It contains all the wisdom. It contains everything that happened on the planet. It contains all of the shifts and the changes. And we're made of the stardust from the very beginning of time. And the rings in our trunk are really just atoms that have repurposed themselves over and over and over again, and the space between the atoms and the space between the electrons and the neutrons. And all of those spaces contain wisdom and knowledge and access to information about how to dance with other particles of consciousness, if we want to language it that way. So the wisdom that ever was already exists, and it exists both in the atoms and in most of reality, which comprises of particles of pure possibility, light particles that have not yet landed in 3D. So for me, to live by heart, it's really about the heart of every cell. It's like the receptor sites on the cells and the receptor sites on the chromosomes receive information from that greater consciousness constantly through particles of light, which comprise that 97% of all that exists that doesn't even exist yet in 3D. And we receive that information, the information from whatever has ever been. We receive that information through those receptor sites. Science has shown that we receive photon particles of light through our cell walls. And so those photon packages of light are part of what's ever been. So imagine if we could go direct with the heart of that level of wisdom, direct with the heart of that level of consciousness, direct with the heart of, just our own greater experience that transcends this one lifetime. So when I'm talking about living by heart, I really mean living by the heart of what's available to us as humans so that we can flow with what life brings us with a much greater degree of wisdom. It's so funny because I was just thinking, we bip along in life, and most of us aren't really paying attention to
Right.
what life is telling us. We're paying attention to what we need to do to survive. So the other thing for me, it's funny, I still have this up from this morning. When you follow your heart, you're actually following what it takes in order to thrive, to go beyond the confines of like, oh my God, limited resources, limited love, limited abundance. You're actually starting to be able to have everything come to you, because consciousness just wants us all to expand. We were born to, that's why all of us feel this sense of urgency that there's something more. We constantly feel that sense of urgency because consciousness, the universe, is always expanding. So if the universe is always expanding and we're particles of the universe, then we feel that we're in that river, which means that we're always being called to expand too. We're always being called to create, just like creation is, because we're particles of it. You can't separate. So when we live by heart, we're actually living in that flow with consciousness. And when we try to control things and just merely survive, which we were never born for, we're going against the flow of consciousness. We're not following our heart. We're following the very limited confines of man-made strategies to try to simply get by, which of course causes struggle because it goes against the flow of consciousness, which supports us in going forward and out. It's abundant. So trying to control it and trying to merely survive is against the entire premise of living by heart. Do you kind of get what I'm saying?
I totally do. I've been living it in the past, and it's following the trajectory where the heart is taking you is the only way to really find that inner joy, I think.
Yeah, everything else, it feels like hard work or struggle, or it's
Yeah.
not like you don't have, a lot of people hear me share this and they think that that means everything's joyful and happy all the time and everything always works out the way you expected, and relationships are always awesome, and that's not true. The threads of consciousness are all about creating upon creation, but you need contrast in order to be inspired to the next creation or to think about things differently or to figure out a new way. You need things to be consistently imperfect. So it's part of the design of being alive. Just if you're going to follow your heart, you're in creative mode, which is part of thriving. When you follow logic, you're really trying to control life so you can expect outcomes and trying to nail it. I mean, we get freaked out by change. We get freaked out by anything being different than what we expect. But the only thing that's the consistent, the constant, never ending is change and something new. And so following the heart also means letting go of attachments and expectations so that you can actually have these incredible things happen, whether they cause great sadness or whether they cause great happiness, or whether the emotion has nothing to do with it. It's more about being catalyzed to create more flow in our lives, more meaning, more connection, more intimacy, more love. And sometimes in order to do that, you need contrast, which doesn't always feel comfortable or, you know, anything, you know, north of neutral. Sometimes it feels south of neutral a lot. So it's all good.
Definitely. So flow, being in the flow definitely includes that contrast.
Being in the flow equals how do I, like, if you want to be in the flow, ask this question: how do I dance with the contrast? Not how do I get rid of the contrast. The question, if you want to remain in the flow, is how do I dance with this like a child might dance with it? You know, with curiosity. The two words are curious. I'm curious about what's going on, and I'm on the adventure of discovering what it is, because by definition, I know that the universe moves forward and out into lands that we've never been. So this is going to be something that I don't know about. And if you don an adventurous childlike spirit, all of a sudden it becomes a game, it becomes play. And now you're playing with the inevitable unfolding of life on the leading edge of consciousness. Now you're having fun. The thing that people get scared about is they forget that consciousness has your back. The universe has your back. The universe loves you. See, if you understood that as a fundamental premise, then the unknown is no longer scary. It's just, so funny how we collapse this idea of this is really frightening or scary or horrible, when it's really just unfamiliar to us. Right. And collapsing the idea of something being really frightening with the idea that it's actually simply, unfamiliar. The way to get something that's scary to be familiar is to call it unfamiliar, and then do it enough or practice enough or be around it enough that it's no longer unfamiliar. But that's life. And then you die, or at least this body does. So that's the other part of things not being scary when you're following your heart. It takes courage at first. But you realize, this body's going to die anyways, but you are eternal. If you're eternal, what's there to be scared about? Just go, milk life for all it's worth. Have a great time. You're eternal.
Very good point.
Yeah, I mean, you don't die. So okay, so have this lifetime. Looks like a cool lifetime as far as lifetimes go. Go nuts.
I love that. So our next question is, how does that wisdom actually speak to us in scientific terms to support spirituality when we're talking about the wisdom of the heart?
So now that we have a different definition of sort of living by heart, it is still living by love, because what it says is consciousness, the universe, isness at large, physics at large, is flowing forward and out in a humongous, harmonious call to more and more creativity and love. So if you imagine that the ingredients of this forward flow, or the fuel for it, is love, which means, so we're particles in this river of love, and everything is being given to us, but we fight against it because we can't see the outcome, and we're scared that we can't control what happens, or that we're not going to like it. But in the end, the entire universe loves us because we're particles of the entire universe. So, I mean, how could it not? We are it. It is us. So how scientifically does that look? How it looks, actually, if you don't mind me drawing something.
Yeah,
now
go
that
for
we're
it.
talking about it. So how it looks is this. It's kind of interesting. It looks like we have, so if you imagine that consciousness, all that is in wave form, it's in light form, it's in all sorts of different forms. But there's a communion. There's these light particles that have different sacred geometries in them, right? And they contain frequencies. That's how they contain a ton of information each. And then the universe made us, little old us, with cells. And all of these beautiful cells that we have on the outside are little receptor sites. And these receptor sites, some of them are for photon packages of light, even different kinds of receptor sites for different kinds of photons. We have one for synchrotron radiation. We have one for another kind of radiation. We have different ones for different things. Kind of like a plant, you know how plants do photosynthesis. They receive all this energy from the sun, it transforms it, et voila. But in this case, although it can be fuel for the body, it also carries information. It's multi-purpose. And who's to say that the same isn't true for plants? How do they know to grow? Where does the information come from? So also there is now just irrefutable evidence that plants commune with each other. They actually connect and inform each other. A good example of that, of course, is mushrooms. They definitely connect with each other. There's no question, but they connect underground. Plants, in fact, have conversations with each other. We have been to several places where they connect diodes to plants. And when you interpret what they're giving off, it sounds like music. It's just beautiful, harmonious music. So we're doing the same. We're emanating these basically photon packages of light are like thought forms that inform consciousness about who we are and what we're interested in based on the choices and thoughts and where we put our attention, right? And so consciousness, of course, even from the sun, there are photon packages of light coming back to us. So most of the information, for instance, when I'm working with a client, most of the information I pick up on is not what they say, it's actually what they're emanating. So when I say that I see holographically, it really means that I'm really good at interpreting the photon packages of light that person and the information around them about their environment and their life and their ancestry and their trajectory going forward. I'm really good at sort of interpreting that in 3D, right? And we can all do that. So scientifically speaking, if you imagine all the information about you is emanating from 50 trillion cells, and then all of consciousnness is then communing back to you with trillions of cells. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden there's this dance going on. There's information being exchanged with infinite wisdom, but we run around trying to operate our lives from our head, and that's what causes struggle. So the scientific explanation is basically something that's been, it's like hiding in plain sight. It's so obvious. It's just blatantly obvious at this point that we are being supported so profoundly. I remember when I was little, I'm sure I'm a weirdo, and I'm sure not a lot of other people have thought this, but I remember being little and I thought to myself, but how do my cells know to replicate? How do my lungs know? Like, where's the instructor for my lungs, like going like this? Where's the instructor for my heart pumping? Like, where's the instruction? Why does my body know that all the nutrients have to come through my small intestine? And how does everything know where it's supposed to go? And, what is a fight or flight? Or it's like, what's the mechanism of that? And I remember thinking to myself, I don't understand why we even have to get old. Like, where is the old thing where's the instructor for I'm going to get old, right? Where does that come from? And really, it's an agreement that lies in photon packages of light that we tap into. The cool thing is an agreement or a thought form in consciousness made of photon packages of light is something that can be adhered to or not. You can choose. So for me, I see it very scientifically because of the way I see holographically. It's not, seeing holographically for me is not woo-woo. It's just training yourself to become extremely sensitive and adept at taking energetic information and turning it into kind of like a roadmap. Mm-hmm. And so, and it's not energetic information, new agey, crunchy granola, Birkenstock wearing stuff. It's really a thing. It's
Yeah.
photon packages of light, which scientists who study that will tell you they're real. It's just being able to see that they carry information and being able to translate the language of consciousness
Right.
deeply. And everyone can do that. So living by heart, scientifically speaking, is that. It's being able to translate the language of consciousness much more adeptly. And when you can, you don't concern yourself so much with the logic of your brain. You don't concern yourself so much with what the television told you or what you read in a book. You start being far more interested in what infinite intelligence is telling you, because it's infinite intelligence. And infinite intelligence, of course, has awareness of everything in the entire universe. So it seems a little bit more wise than simply following people's three-dimensional roadmaps of how to live. It's a start,
Oh,
but then at some point you have to start following your own instincts being those photon packages of light that are coming through consciousness for you. So is that
to-
you get
totally.
it?
Yeah. What comes to my thought process here is, how does that relate to like people picking up on others' energy like empathically? Is
It's
that kind?
exactly what,
Yeah.
yeah. So here's the thing. The word, I'm on a mission with respect to the word empath, because I used to call myself an empath. But of course, we're all empathic to some degree.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of people, in this community often say, well, I'm too empathic, or it's almost like a bad thing. Like, I'm empathic, right? Like, oh my God, I pick up on everything. What we have to understand, though, is when we say, oh my gosh, I pick up on everything, the photon packages of light you emanate out into consciousness, because consciousness doesn't discern. It just hears like, oh my God, this person has a lot of attention on the idea that they pick up on everything. So what consciousness hears is, you're really interested in picking up on everything. So now you pick up on more things. Well, the funny thing is the same mechanism that has you overly sensitive, and I do mean overly aware, which usually, not always, but usually sometimes you're born into it, but oftentimes it's when you have a lot of volatility around you, and it becomes a protective mechanism. I have to figure out what's going on around me, figure out how my mom is, figure out how my dad is, and your telomeres, your receptor sites turn out. They're not looking at what your instincts say. They're looking at what's going on with everybody else to make sure that you don't get pummeled or hurt or judged or whatever happens in your household. So it's a training over time, because remember, as you put your attention on all of that, the universe thinks that whatever you put your attention on is more important. So it will send you more of it. So we say that we're empathic, but in actuality, we are totally in the Ferrari driver's seat. This is a Ferrari. You're in the driver's seat. And in fact, you could be like me, you could be super sensitive to stuff, but you see, I drive it.
Yeah.
So what I started to see is that I didn't have to be sensitive all the time. I really started to be more interested in being sensitive to things in situations where I could assist someone, like I could actually help. So I started through a series of processes, but I'm going to put it into I'm going to make it simplistic. I started to retrain myself to be interested in, how do I assist? And how do I assist in timing that's not going to burn me out? And how do I assist in a way that's in harmony with the rest of consciousness, where there are other people that can assist too, where I don't always have to be the one,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so all of a sudden, instead of being overly sensitive to everything, and what that led to, by the way, in the world of empathy, is it led to, I stopped calling myself an empath, because why would I want to attract more of that, first of all?
Right.
Secondly, I said, no, I am here to assist. I'm a bridge builder. I'm here to assist. If I can be this sensitive, I can also be this sensitive to the universe and the solutions that would resolve the very things that I used to be frightened of because I was overly sensitive. So the cool thing about being empathic, which everyone can be if you just made it important.
Right.
The cool thing is that the more things that you've seen that maybe are scary or horrible, if you can include those things in your experience, but then turn your attention to if something really horrific can happen, it's also catalyzed you towards the answer to that horrific thing.
Mm-hmm.
And consciousness has already created the resolution. So imagine you're also, just as much as you're a conduit for all the things that you felt that you've gone to, you're also instantaneously, although you may not have turned your attention to them, but the minute you ask, consciousness has created all the solutions for the contrast that you have experienced. So imagine you instantly if you just turn your attention and you start asking to be shown the bridges to the way out, you're equally as sensitive to those as you are. Sensitivity is sensitivity. You're just as sensitive to the solutions as you are to the issues that you feel. So it's just a matter of where you put your attention. And sometimes it's a little scary to start driving that car. You know, it's a little overwhelming, especially if you've lived your life that way. Does that kind of make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And beautiful to know that you can take those keys and it doesn't have to be something that you continue to choose.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't have, I'm living proof of that. You do not have to do that. It is, you probably know about our program, Innate Abilities. Innate Abilities is all about it's about driving the Ferrari. It's not just about having a Ferrari and being steamrollered by every other being and situation on the planet. It's about taking the Ferrari and being able to have fun on the racetrack, because when you're steamrollered by everything, it's not fun. But when you actually learn how to drive this awesome machine, holy cow, it is fun.
What a beautiful set of keys to have.
Yes, exactly.
Let's see here. What is happening between our physical bodies and consciousness when we shift to living by heart?
When we shift to living by heart, we're basically going from survival to thriving. So you're going from, okay. So when you're not living by heart, when you're not living by instinct, not when you have 50 trillion cells with receptor sites for, information from consciousness. Now, you only have 2 eyes, a nose, 2 ears, and a mouth. So you're receiving from the 3-dimensional world input, including, information from books, and you're watching movies, and you're trying to be inspired even by this conversation, we're taking in information. And even though this information might sound really super duper good, and we just sound like raving geniuses together, just because we sound like raving geniuses to ourselves, it still takes discernment. When you give your power away to so-called limited resources, so-called other people, so-called information, historical novels, other people have their lives working and they do documentaries, and then you listen to those, you're trying to get the right answers. And people just take it in that information and they think, well, okay, that sounds good. It worked for them, so I'm going to do that. That is actually what I call that is surviving. And you might think, no, I'm trying to get information to be able to thrive. And I'm like, no, what you're doing is you're saying I'm broken and I need fixing, which is the very first word that comes to mind when I think of surviving. Like, I'm not complete. The universe didn't think I was a good idea. I'm not a child of the divine, I'm not infinite wisdom didn't think I was a good idea. But of course, infinite wisdom thought I was a good idea. I was never broken. I just came for a certain kind of journey. There's nothing broken about my journey. It's just the journey I came to go on so I could build those bridges and have that contrast so I could create upon creation. That's all. There's nothing wrong. So what I say is people who are trying to fix themselves, you're just surviving better. So surviving better is very different than thriving. because thriving is an entirely different operating system. And when we talk about living by heart, what you've got is a degree of confidence with consciousness. It takes a while to develop your understanding of the language of consciousness. To understand, now, there's obvious ones. Obviously, if you just walked into any room and say, how many people in here live by heart? And maybe, 5 out of 100 go, I think I live by heart. And then you ask them what they mean. And if they are, they're living with love and they're following their instincts a lot and they're being kind and maybe they're doing stuff. It's living by heart. Maybe they're very generous and they do volunteer work, and that's all a part of living. They're very grateful. That's all part of living by heart. It's all part of thriving. But thriving is an entirely different operating system. There's no perception that you're broken. And by the way, that doesn't mean if there's no perception that you're broken, it means, oh my God, I really got to work extra hard now because now I really got to fix myself. The way to thrive, Jennifer said the way to thrive is to not be broken anymore. I'm not saying that because you got to fix yourself. I'm saying it because you never were broken.
Right.
And the minute you make that shift, you got to ask yourself, well, then if I'm not broken, then what is there to do? Well, what there is to do is to learn the language of consciousness so that you can do what we always say we're fingers of the hand of God. We're creator consciousness in human form. I mean, it's said a million different ways in this world. Well, if we're creators and we're extensions of source, I've heard that said by Abraham. I mean, there's a million ways to say it. If we are extensions of source, if we are creator and we're here to create, then why are we spending all our time fixing ourselves when we were here to create? There's nothing broken. One more thing I want to say.
Yeah.
I have a frenemy. I mean, I love this person. I'm not so sure. I think I am just way too tree shaky for him. And so I shake his tree all the time. One of the things he gets very frustrated by is he gets frustrated by the idea that there's too many new agey, new thinking. And his world is really the world of very psychologist, therapist, like that kind of world. Mm-hmm. But so many therapists and psychologists come and do our work because it's a missing link. Yes, it could be perceived that you go to a therapist or a psychologist because you feel like you're broken and you need fixing, but I language it a different way. You're not broken. You're seeking a deeper truth you're seeking meaning or a deeper truth to heal what happened to you. You're seeking to understand it in a way that makes sense. And sometimes there's a way to understand it differently. And even metaphysically and in the hologram, you can see amazing reasons why something happened that brings you great peace. But other times, shit just happens. Really crappy stuff happens and it sucks. And there's no way around like if you were raped by your uncle at 5 years old, that's not okay. It's just not okay. So there's no way, you're not going to have rainbows coming out your butt about that. That's not okay. It's not okay. It's not okay in the world. It's not okay that it happened to you. So sometimes people look at that as broken and needing fixing, but you're not broken. That's the journey you came for. The compassion that you have for others who have gone through that is so healing for the world and for others. You become a bridge and you get to be the walking storyboard for that particular kind of experience. And as you build a bridge to finding your way home back to enjoying your life and loving it despite everything, or sometimes because of what's happened to you, gleaning more appreciation, you metaphysically pave a pathway for others to do the same. It doesn't change what happened to you, but it brings meaning to what happened to you. It brings a level of contribution. And then you die, and then you do it over again. Maybe the same yucky stuff doesn't happen, but in these times of great change, it's just so important that we understand that we're in the middle of building a collective communal bridge to a world that's a lot more compassionate. And in the middle of that bridge, which is where we're at, a lot of contrast happens so that more people can be catalyzed to make their world a better place and be the living example of what's possible. The more all of us do that, the more what's possible becomes the reality rather than the contrast from before. And that's really what that's the bigger picture of why it's important to live by heart. That's what we're creating.
Beautiful. Well, I know that we're at the end of our half-hour interview.
Mm-hmm.
So how can people connect with you to upgrade their operating system?
Well, they can do a couple of things. They can, well, the best thing if they wanted to start is we have these wonderful things called brain bridges. They help you understand those deeper truths so that your biochemistry can change, so that your default level of receiving changes. And you can find those easily at thewideawakening.com/3 days. Or you can always, one of the greatest places to always get information, my dear, is on our YouTube channel. Just go and subscribe to the Wide Awakenings YouTube channel. You'll see it. Just search Jennifer Hough and YouTube, and you'll find our YouTube channel, and just go and subscribe to the channel and start watching some things. And what will happen is this biochemistry will start to shift and your life will start to change. And who knows, maybe someone will be inspired to come and do some work. So it's, it's such an honor to be able to bridge people back home, because then I'm going to die, I mean, why not? We're all going to kick the bucket. So why not contribute to the bridge to harmony that's being built, right? Just like you are through this series.
Well, thank you so much for helping us to bridge into our hearts and to begin to listen a little deeper to the whisper, the calling, and follow us, guide us there.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing all the information to people to be able to do this. I mean, I truly believe we find each other and we're all in this together. So, you know that I call it the heaven on earth construction crew. So I really do believe we're all in this together.
Beautiful. Well, I do have more questions for you. So I don't know, do you have more time? I can go into overtime if you'd like. Okay, cool.
Sure.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I know that you are such a sought after teacher, and I wanted to make sure that your time frame was good for more questions.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Why are we so strongly called to be or do more than we already do?
The answer to that lies in how physics works. So imagine, have you ever heard of a Mobius loop?
Yep.
Okay. So for people who haven't heard of a Mobius loop, it's basically this really cool, I first had it demonstrated when I was in some crop circles in England. And one of the men that wrote the most profound book, his name is Michael, about crop circles. He's the one that decoded the one that was related to pi. And he's just so cool. But he had a sheet of paper and he showed us a Mobius loop. And I'm like, and my sweetie Adam also gets this pretty profoundly too. You see, in the universe, there is time isn't, time is a human thing in consciousness. It's not, so it exists, but exists for humans to be able to have an excuse to live their life. But if you imagine that time is bendable, and sometimes it's hard for people to understand that concept. You watch movies that talk about how if you go through a wormhole or a black hole, you get older faster, or you get older less fast, or whatever, because you bend time. Mm-hmm. So but the cool thing is that in this time-space reality where human beings have lived their history, there has been a lot of contrast. I'll get back to the Mobius loop idea in a second. So imagine that over thousands of years, there's been, people taking over land, much more heinous times than even right now, raping, pillaging, burning villages down. I mean, really inhumane, horrible, horrible, horrible. Not that it doesn't exist now, but actually per capita, it was a lot worse for a lot of our history. So imagine human beings still had the same heart, still had the same yearning, all the prayers that got launched, all the yearnings that got launched, all the wishes that got launched. So imagine that enough of those wishes, enough of those yearnings, enough of those desires would get landed into the future, because they're thought forms. Remember, photon packages of light. So they're thought forms, so they exist. So enough people have enough wishes for a world that's different. And then all of a sudden a tipping point happens. And depending on who you talk to, some people say 2000, some people say 2012. Some people said there have been those times many times in our history. It doesn't really matter. All I know is that when I look at the hologram, there is a tremendous, so there's the other side of that bridge we talked about earlier. And that other side of the bridge has been activated. It's been amplified, it's been talked about, it's been yearned for, it's been desired. It exists in physics, what we wish for. So what happens, that sense of urgency that people feel, they are always feeling called forward. What happens is that future has so much energy, the future of harmony and understanding each other, still contrast, still emotions, it doesn't matter. You're going to have all the feelings when you get to that place. It's just that the fluidity and the compassion, the understanding will be different, and our ability to co-create, it will be a lot more fun. But that's a thing. That's in a future dimension. It exists. It's been asked for. It's been thought of. So it exists. So now imagine if there is no time and space, that in a Mobius loop fractal universe, it's all right now as well. So imagine that in our multidimensional selves, not in the 3D, but in our multidimensional selves, we get to feel all of that now. Mm-hmm. So the more aware we get, the more we can feel the calling forward. And by the way, Jacqueline, I've never actually said it this way before. So this is the first time I'm saying this way. So the more we get awakened, the more we start to realize that the language of consciousness is speaking to us. The more we get out of the way of the universe, the more we stop concerning ourselves with fixing something that's not broken. The more we're getting present to the realm where there is no time and space, where that future that we've activated is right now. So the sense of urgency is being amplified like mad crazy because we're being aware of the multidimensional aspects of ourselves where that future has already been created. Whereas before we were in 3D, and in 3D, you can't feel that yearning. So isn't it funny that the same humanity and those souls launched this future, and then we realized that we had to wake up enough to actually tap into the very consciousness where time and space doesn't exist, so that we could feel the very thing that we asked for in other lifetimes. And the feeling of that is what's calling us to wake up even more. And the waking up even more is allowing us to be present to the solutions, because that reality has been created, but so have all the solutions to get there. So the more we wake up, the more we feel the solutions, more we understand it. I mean, it's really crazy to think about that way.
Wow. That's mind-blowing.
Isn't it? Like, seriously, right?
Right? Oh, I love it. I love this conversation. I don't even want it to end. Okay, another question. How can we use the energy of that heart's calling to fly forward and love our lives?
Well, imagine the bigger picture of your life, having just explained what I explained, is actually as a bridge builder to that future reality. If you can take on your purpose as that delicious and that big and that beautiful and that fulfilling and that, like, and you'll be, likelihood is you'll be alive in the lifetimes as that comes to fruition. And you're the one actually changing the world for your children. You're the one changing the world for your great, great, great grandchildren. And you'll even be there. You'll come back and experience that. So remember, we don't die. The fact that we don't die is such a great example of collapsing time. Because isn't it funny that you get to create something in 3D now, and like 500 years from now, you get to come back and experience, like, your spirit, which will collapse into non-space-time reality, will come back in a millisecond to spirit's consciousness and be able to see what you created. I mean, it's so cool.
Sounds like a pretty awesome movie.
It's funny. My sweetie and I, yeah, we were talking about that. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. And what are the 3 most important tools to embody so that you can live in the miracle zone?
The 3 most important tools to embody if you're going to live in the fluidity of going direct with consciousness is, much like what we've been speaking about, you have to understand that this 3-dimensional world is not who we I know. Okay. Let's say 3 steps. Okay. 1 step is go and watch the movie Tomorrowland. That's a good one.
Awesome.
Okay. So the second step is probably, well, go to our YouTube channel and watch the playlist called About Going Direct. That would be really good. So that'll give you a second step, and it'll give you homework and some tools so that you can do it, and it's free. The third step is to train yourself by, let's language it this way. To allow yourself to see when things are not fluid, and to allow yourself to be super sensitive to when a direction or a situation does not feel good. And train yourself to walk away and to look elsewhere. You can always revisit it, you can always come back, you can always make a phone call later, you can always whatever, but to be such a relentless champion of how you feel that you're not willing to engage in craziness. You become, if you're going to be empathic, start being super sensitive to when things don't work, but be proactive about it. Don't become a recluse and run away from it. Actually become proactive, saying, you know what, I really can't engage in this right now. I'm not strong enough. I'm not fortified enough. I don't have any answers. I need to walk away and find solutions. Until I have solutions, there's no point in really chewing on this one. So I'm going to take a step away, for a day, a month, it doesn't even matter. Whatever it takes to allow for the solutions, then come back. So being super sensitive to what isn't working without making the situation or the people involved wrong. You don't need to make them wrong. You just need to be responsible for you, because the person who maintains their vibration or assists to get to a different place is the person who's going to receive the most answers. And if the purpose of our lives is to build bridges to more compassion and more harmony, then guess what? You are doing your job when you're doing that. So those would be 3 pretty good steps. I think Tomorrowland's a good big picture. Our Going Direct program on, YouTube is like pragmatic and practical. And then the applied in your life version is just be a relentless champion. It's so simple, but it would change that whole way of being changes your life. So
most definitely. And that third one, it's amazing the beautiful energetic shifts that can occur when you just are willing to be an allowance of you and let go.
yeah, it's easy to say when you've
Oh,
had a really traumatizing past or when you spent decades practicing a certain way of being, which is why there are programs and why there are ways to get assistance and why certain people can see holographically and other people have other gifts. It's so as to assist people. But that's another thing, is never give your power away to anybody. Find the people you want to work with, but work with them because they're a genius in their field. But know that if you've found geniuses out there in the world that can assist you, it means you're an equal genius or have the potential to be an equal genius in whatever you're up to. So never, ever give your power away to anyone. We're all side by side. It takes the whole team to shift a planet. So
fun to play in the playground with you, Jennifer.
my pleasure. So fun.
Okay, and one last question. What is embodiment, and why does that concept matter when living by heart?
Well, okay, so here's the difference. So I just said homework. I just said, okay, be really sensitive to when you're getting lower or feeling disempowered or giving your power away. Like, get really sensitive to it and go and do whatever it takes in order to feel better, right? So that's something you do in the moment. That is not embodiment. Embodiment means that just becomes the automatic way that you are. So in all of the programs that we teach, it's all about embodiment. It is not about giving you tools to be able to live better day by day by day. That's in the long run. In the short run, absolutely do those exercises. Yeah. In the long run, you want to do the work to completely shift the way your brain approaches life. That takes someone to help you. So when you're talking about living by heart, embodiment is the way to permanently live by heart. You wouldn't do it any other way, because you've learned the language, right? You're going direct with consciousness. You've learned the language. You're in a certain degree of flow. Nothing puts you off track. You just stay. You appreciate different emotions. You appreciate the contrast. You are excited to be alive even when really sad or bad things happen. You feel, it's not like you're happy about it, but you're appreciative of this creative journey with others. It's very powerful that way, and it's fulfilling. So it's not always happy, but it's definitely fulfilling and meaningful. So that's what embodiment has to do with living by heart. Living by heart is really, in the long run, it's really super hard if you're constantly using your mind to try to change your situation. But when you embody the deeper understandings about how the universe works and why your life was what it was, when you actually understand deeper universal truths, what happens is your entire biochemistry changes, and how you deal with life is totally different. And that's basically what happened to me over the last 20 years. And so it's why I pay it forward, right? So
well, beautiful.
yeah.
Thank you so much for your generosity, Jennifer. This has been such a gift. And I just say, we're dancing with the universe and dancing together in all that we're creating and sharing in how to follow the heart is such a beautiful contribution. So thank you for being so generous with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, there's an endless supply. I'm sure there are conversations for day, but conversations don't make up for actually doing it, right? Like actually changing your life and actually taking the action. So this conversation is such a great catalyst, and yeah, it's always fun because the conversation deepens for me too, right? So thank you, my love.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you for being here. Thank you for being on our planet and for being you. It's such a beautiful gift. And thank you to all of our listeners today. This was an extra special, extra long session of Follow Your Heart. And so grateful for all of you, for all you be, and all you share. Thank you.